Horror is subjective, more than most genres, and fear is a tricky emotion to gauge. But we can all agree that Outlast 2 is one of the scariest games of all time, and somehow its user interface has something to do with why it's so scary. In this video, we're going to explore the user interface of Outlast 2. Like its predecessor, Outlast 2 aimed for a very simple and immediate to grasp mechanics. The game makes us live the experience of the protagonist, Blake Langerman, in the first-person perspective by giving us the camera as an aid. The HUD in horror games is a very important aspect, and Outlast handles that in a very clever way by designing a minimally invasive and immersive user interface. So let me break it down to you. There are three modes of visualization that the player can switch from anytime: camera off, camera on without infrared, and camera on with infrared. Starting with camera off, the player will be left with a cursor in the middle of screen. In this non-diegetic mode, we simply have no HUD, simulating a clean first-person view, and only when the player approaches an interactable element, the cursor will be transformed into a circle, and the game will display the button that needs to be pressed to take the action. Camera on without infrared. In this diegetic mode, the view moves inside the camera, and a HUD layer appears to give us more important info. In the bottom, we see a slider representing how much we are zooming, where W when we are fully zoomed out, and T when we are fully zoomed in. Moving on to the top right, you'll see the battery state, and it has two states: white when the charge bars are in the first 3/4 of the battery, and red for the last quarter. There are several other components, but they are used for aesthetic factors, and not for functionality, because they have no use in terms of gameplay. Camera on with infrared. This will allow us to see in the dark, but will limit the view to only few meters, and will consume the battery more quickly. These two critical issues of using the infrared mode will force us to choose the right moment in which to activate it. Looking at the top right again, we see the infrared toggles enabling whenever we trigger the night vision mode. Aside of them, there is one other toggle for the microphone. By activating the microphone function, the HUD displays a simple graph enabling us to locate the position of enemies around. This system creates an immersive gameplay, and it also leads to some very interesting outcomes. The feedback loop in Outlast is what we call trial and error feedback loop, where the player loses multiple times and every time try to find a better solution than the previous one. The player also can collect batteries and bandages, so he can reload his camera and heal when he's bleeding. But unlike the first game, the development team decided to remove the battery counter from the UI and putting the batteries as a physical object in the character's pocket where he can see all of his collected items. This decision makes the game more realistic, and it added more value to the gameplay. This minimalistic user interface reduces the cognitive load of the player, so he can focus only on the gameplay and not getting distracted by the HUD elements. And in terms of gameplay, the system overrides all of the UI elements and displays a meta UI blood splash image whenever the player is getting hit. Back to the main menu, Red Barrels choose a classical and simple to use user interface, same as the first game, to keep its consistency with the game's content. What's interesting about Outlast is that its simple user interface summarizes every aspect of the game. Its game design is cleverly established, and this is why it makes you jump out of your seat. Outlast uses a variety of UI classes to express itself, and with a simple user interface designed to make you immersed in its world, Outlast 2 arguably has one of the best and most unique user interfaces in video game history. In the next video, we will be analyzing the 2014 horror game hit Alien Isolation and how it uses the user interface to its advantage.